Today, in current events from a Christian perspective, Disney's new Marvel series is, can you guess, and this is a quote, the gayest yet. Meanwhile, the governor of Kentucky outlaws conversion therapy, quote unquote. What is that and how does it affect Christians? We need to have a discussion about that. Then we learn about the Navy's newest, quote, gender neutral submarine, end quote, and talk about how confining men and women in tight spaces underwater for weeks or months on a time could not possibly go badly, or something like that. Finally, we check in with the Pope, who now says that all religions are voices or directions that lead to God or something like that. We will hear straight from him on how I don't understand what he's saying lines up with Christianity. All this and more today. I'm Matt Odegaard, and this is Church Public. Welcome back to Church Public. Wow, I really appreciate you stopping by today. If this is your first time, welcome. If you've been here for years at this point, I really appreciate you too. If you're listening on audio, wow, thank you so much. If you want to see the video, and there will be videos in this episode, you can go to YouTube. It may or may not. Man, I'm trying to follow their rules, but who knows? I got another hit the other day. Where they pulled the whole video down because I said something they didn't like. So I don't know. I don't know what's going to happen, but I will try to post it somewhere where you can see the video. If you want to see the video, you can always go to churchpublic.com for the latest information there. And if you want to support, you can go to churchpublic.com/support because this is a labor of love, and I appreciate you. Whether you're praying, watching, supporting, all of that helps, and I love it. I want to bring you current events from a Christian perspective to help you live out your faith because, wow, more and more, there are just crazy things going on in the world, and I think we can learn how to live our faith by looking at these events in the world, these current events, and then learn how we're supposed to live in this because it's going to get more wacky from here. That's just the way things are. Okay. So now to the first news, and I wish I could stop talking about Disney, but apparently they just keep pushing things. Their new series, Agatha, all along, about a bunch of witches, according to them. It's proclaimed to be, and this is a quote, the gayest project Marvel has ever done, end quote, according to cast member Sashir Zamata. Probably pronounced that wrong, but... And another actress, Aubrey Plaza, who plays the Green Witch Rio Vidal, and we'll hear from her in a moment, was excited about the gay content of the series, agreed with an interviewer that the show gets, quote, gayer and gayer and will be, quote, a gay explosion by the end quote. Whatever that means. And I don't even want to know. The series also stars Catherine Hahn, the defrocked 300-year-old witch. Apparently, she's not a witch anymore. Agatha Harkness, title of the character. And it's supposed to go live on Disney Plus this week for a 9-episode run. The rest of the plot, honestly, doesn't matter. And I didn't write it down, and I don't really care because no one's going to watch this. But here are a couple of the stars talking about it, just so that you don't have to take my word for it. So, as always, I'm having audio issues because the devil in these details, man, just really, really does not like when I do these podcasts, apparently. So I'm going to press a button here and continue to talk, and then we're going to reset it while this is all happening in real time because, as I mentioned, this is a production of one. I'm the one person who presses the buttons, who does the recordings, who sets up all the clips and hits all the clips and does all the things. And it's interesting every single time. So I'm going to press this button, and then I'm going to press this button and see if we have audio now.
That Agatha is the gayest project Marvel has ever done. Agree?
I would agree with that, yeah.
Why is it?
You'll see. You'll see when you watch it. But, I think witches are queer inherently just because we are outcast and set aside for many reasons, and I think this show shows a really good representation of different types of people, and that we can all use the power we have within to go forth and be great.
There's so much happening in this clip. So obviously you heard from them and this interviewer that it's supposed to be the gayest Marvel movie series, Disney Marvel spectacular ever. And of course, they're all really excited about that. I think there's another point here that we have to point to, and that is this connection between witchcraft and this new LGBTQAIP hashtag plus plus squiggly emoji $ phenomenon. And maybe that shouldn't be ignored. The fact that there is a apparent, really clear connection between these two things. Maybe that's something we should pay attention to. And again, just to keep going back to the Bible, because we do go back to the Bible here. And I won't even quote any verses. This is going to sound heretical, but do your own reading. Do a little word study for occult, witchcraft, and those types of things in the Bible, and you will find all over the Old Testament and New Testament, those are bad, and you're not supposed to do those, and not supposed to associate with witchcraft and occult things. I mean, that should be obvious. Because, I mean, go back to the 10 Commandments. We've got, there's a God, and there's only one God, and you should worship and serve him only. 10 Commandments, Deuteronomy, Leviticus. So, that should be something that everyone pays attention to and doesn't go down this witchcraft trap. But, I don't know. I don't know what's going on here. Then. So we have this, just Disney again, really, really wanting to not do normal things and just be normal. Like this shouldn't be a hard thing, but just be normal. Just do normal things, write normal stories. But no, they have to be the gayest ever. Not my words, according to them. And second clip, I think we have about this. This is one of the actresses in the movie. Oh, no, I have to pause before I say that, because I picked up something. I don't know if you want to hear it again, but I'll play a little bit of it again.
That Agatha is the gayest project Marvel has ever done.
Listen to this.
Agree?
I would agree with that. Yeah.
Why is it?
You'll see. You'll see when you watch it. But, I think witches are queer inherently just because we are outcast.
Okay. So you missed it the first time. She says, we witches. Now, perhaps that was just a slip of the tongue. She's really, really in character of the witch that she plays in this show. Maybe. But we have seen such a proliferation of witchcraft and witches and witchery things. Go back and listen to the archives. It's in a lot of the episodes that I've done, because people, especially girls, for some reason, are really, really into this and have been for a while. So is she saying that we, the witches, as we play actresses on this show, are outcasts and queer from society? Or is she saying that we, actually are witches? I don't know. I just think it's weird. I'm just pointing it out. Okay. Second actress talking about this, and this is, I promise, all I'm going to do with Disney today, because that's all I can handle. Here you go.
I'm told, I've seen the first episode, but Agatha is the gayest Marvel project.
And apparently, by the way, man, I hate pausing this in the middle of clips, but apparently this is the only question this interviewer can ask, or knows how to ask, or wants to ask. Just saying. Here we go.
Jet, do you agree?
It better be, because that's what I signed up for. I think it is.
Yeah. That's all I have to say about that. It's just this is the world we're living in. It's ridiculous. People signed up specifically, intentionally to be in the gayest show ever. And this is what they want you to watch and want to show on a Disney Plus platform that specifically is targeted at children. Like, Disney was an animation company that made family-friendly entertainment and theme parks. And it just is a continuous tragedy to me that this is what's going on. Okay, let's move on from this shenanigans to more shenanigans. We have the governor of Kentucky, Governor Beshear, who has banned quote-unquote conversion therapy. So what is his definition of conversion therapy? I've talked about this. If you don't recall, man, it was back in 2021 when Canada came out with Bill C-4. You can go back and listen to that in the archives, where they banned conversion therapy. Canada's version of their bill included, I believe, prison time, if I recall, and I didn't look this up, but I think it was 5 years of prison time if you are in offense to this bill. So Kentucky, as a state, has now signed an executive order. So note, it's not a law, it's not a bill, it is just a governor saying, we're banning this, and if you go against it, you will be liable for whatever. punishment an executive order has, I'm sure it will be not great. So, what is this definition of conversion therapy, and does it include biblical Christianity, as we talked about at length when we talked about Bill C-4? Because it's the same word, conversion therapy. What does that mean? So his executive order says, quote, protecting minors from conversion therapy, and he signed this bill today. He signed this banning the practice of conversion therapy on minors in Kentucky. His bill said, quote, Kentucky cannot possibly reach its full potential unless it is free from discrimination by or against any citizen, unless our people feel welcome in our spaces, free from unjust barriers, supported to be themselves. Conversion therapy has no basis in medicine or science and can cause significant long-term harm to our kids, including increased rates of suicide and depression. This is about protecting our youth from an inhumane practice that hurts them, end quote. Now, let's pause here and say, converting them to what or from what? And this only goes one direction. It's important to note again that this conversion therapy is only converting them from whatever LGBTQ, AAIP, hashtag plus plus, squiggly emoji, $, gender they think they are into the thing that biologically they actually are. So this bill says you can't say a boy is a boy or a girl is a girl. That's bad. That's illegal now, apparently, in Kentucky. But it goes the other way. If you say, well, you should change into whatever you think you are, that's completely fine. I think that's an important definition and distinction that we need to run now. Here is a continuation of his definition of conversion therapy. Here we go. Quote, conversion therapy means any practice, treatment, or intervention that seeks or purports to change an individual's sexual orientation or gender identity, including efforts to change behaviors or expressions to eliminate or reduce sexual or romantic attractions or feelings towards individuals of the same gender, end quote. So did you hear in there that any effort to change what they think they are into what they actually are is now illegal? Again, saying your boy is a boy is now illegal if your boy happens to think they are a girl. That's bad and illegal, and you can't do that in Kentucky anymore, according to the governor's executive order. So again, I talked about this way back in 2021. Canada's Bill C-4 did the same thing. Now we are here in America, in red America, in Kentucky of all places. We're not in New York. We're not in California. We're in Kentucky. The proponents of this bill will tell you it's something like avoiding shock therapy or medical castration and other things. But of course, that is potentially bad. And this order probably covers that, but it covers so much more. And the truth is, no one does that kind of thing anymore, anywhere. It just doesn't happen. But the message being sent with this new executive order is, if you believe that in any way it's wrong to claim this new sexual identity, you are the one who is morally bad, presumably including parents. Of course, including pastors and counselors. You can't do that. If you counsel someone who is struggling with any of the LGBTQ, AAIP, hashtag plus plus issues, and you suggest that the Bible has an authority on God's plan for male and female, Genesis 1, then you're breaking this executive order. You're going against this executive order. Here are some questions. If you preach or disciple someone in the image of God, in the image of Christ, presented in, pick any book of the Bible, Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, Timothy, Titus, Corinthians, etc., you are also guilty of breaking this executive order. What happens if you read 1 Corinthians 6, 9 through 11, or 1 Timothy 1, 8 through 11? If you don't know those, go and look those up right now. You will have broken this law because the Bible specifically says those things contained in that executive order are not morally, spiritually lawful. Again, read the Bible, read this executive order. If you do the Bible reading, you are now against the state of Kentucky, presumably. If you say men are men and women are women, you have probably broken this executive order. This new order may even prohibit a parent from telling their child that they are perfect the way they are in God, in Christ, not whatever made-up gender they particularly think in that moment, or the culture has told them, or the social medias have told them. So if you in any way try to convert your children, there may be potential that the state says, well, you are not fit to be a parent, and we need to take your children from you. That may be an extenuating circumstance, or maybe exactly what this executive order is trying to do. I don't know, but read it for yourself. I just read it to you. You can go and look it up as well and judge for yourself. If you read the Bible, if you're a parent who says, no, little Johnny, you're not little Julie, do you now go to jail or get fined or get your children taken away? This is the new world that we're living in, and this is the reality of what we need to make sure we understand as Christians living in this world. This is current events from a Christian perspective, so you can live out your faith, and it may come to a point where you have to encounter this or someone you know will. Again, have to end with the idea that if you, quote unquote, convert people in the other way, there's no penalty, and presumably it's actually encouraged. If you help a man become a woman or a woman become a man because they want to, you're good to go. You probably get praised by everyone around you in culture, but try and tell a man that he's a man, or a boy that he's a boy, or a girl that he is a girl. Do not pass go. Head directly to jail. Okay. That was a terrible story, and I hated talking about it. Let's talk about another story that is just plain ridiculous as I read it, so I figured I'd bring it to our attention. Okay. And apparently this has been happening for some time, but is now specifically happening on purpose. The USS New Jersey, just commissioned by the Navy, is now the first, quote-unquote, gender-integrated submarine. What does gender-integrated submarine mean? Well, a bunch of young, fit, good-looking men and women are trapped in a tiny, confined space under the ocean for weeks or months at a time. Any guesses on what that outcome is going to be? Yeah, that is the new submarine that has been unveiled at the Naval Weapons Station in Middleton, New Jersey. The vessel is the first in its class to be specifically designed to fully integrate male and female sailors, though apparently for a decade and some, they've already been doing that. But now this one is specifically designed to be gender inclusive. Modifications like additional doors, washrooms, and lowering overhead valves to be easier to reach, installing extra steps to the bunk beds so that the women can reach it. So I ask again the questions like, you mean women are generally shorter and smaller than men, so you lowered the ceiling? Like, I'm not the tallest guy, but I'm fairly tall, and that would be rather annoying to note that this submarine has been inclusivized so that I'm going to hit my head more because they lowered the ceiling and the valves and the knobs and the stuff. Not to mention, again, locking a bunch of young and physically fit men and women in a confined space underwater with no means of exiting that space for weeks and months at a time just seems like a really bad idea. But what do I know? The Vice Admiral Robert Goucher said, quote, to support women serving on board submarines, the submarine force, starting with the pre-commissioning unit New Jersey, is building all future, just in case you were wondering, all future submarines and the new Columbia-class submarines gender neutral from the keel up. So you got that going for you, which is great. Okay, let's go to London because we haven't talked about the UK for a while. And yes, I know there's a lot of unrest there, and I don't really want to talk about that. So I had a friend of mine actually who's from Britain the other day, talking to him about it. He was really sad about his home country and what it has become with immigration and some other things. I'm not going to talk about that today. I'm actually going to talk about this story that I saw about Trafalgar Square. If you are unaware, Trafalgar Square commemorated the victory in the British Navy over the Napoleonic Wars and France and Spanish ships, thereby not allowing Napoleon to take over England, which is a great battle and a great victory for England so that the English are not, in fact, French, which is great. But now in Trafalgar Square, there is a new sculpture that has been unveiled on the fourth plinth, fourth platform of Trafalgar Square. This new statue, let's see, I've got a picture right here. No, this is just Trafalgar Square. If you were unaware, this is it. I mean, it's beautiful. I would love to go there. Haven't been there, someday. So I'm gonna play this video. It may get a strike because I'm gonna play this video, and this video is about a new monument that's going up, and there are 726 plaster castings of actual transgender people's faces, and most of them were prostitutes. I feel like these stories are made up, but they're not. I'm going to play you this video. Here's a real story.
A new monument featuring hundreds of plaster casts of transgender and non-binary people has been unveiled on the Trafalgar Square 4th plinth in London. Mil veces un instante, or 1,000 times in an instant, is a sculpture created by Mexican artist Teresa Margolles, which features the life mask of 726 trans, non-binary and gender non-conforming people from around the world. The monument was inspired by the Mesoamerican tradition of Zompantli, a skull rack used to display the remains of war captives or sacrificial victims. Margolles, who is a former forensic pathologist and mortician, applied plaster directly onto the faces of the models, many of whom were sex workers. In a statement, Margolles said the monument was also a tribute to Carla Laborada, a 67-year-old trans singer and former sex worker who was murdered.
Okay, that's enough. You get the idea. Okay, so let's look at a couple of features here because I think it's important for culture and so you understand like where in the world this world is going. So, first of all, this is Trafalgar Square, celebrating a great victory for England, keeping Napoleon out of England, which is a really important thing. Now, they're putting up this transgender sex worker monument, and I want to talk about what this looks like and what it represents in a moment. But before we get to that, let's ask the question, what was on this before? Because this is not a new monument in Trafalgar Square. What was on it before? Well, before it had the statue of Baptist preacher John Chilembwe and British missionary John Chorley, who shared the gospel with the people of Malawi, which sounds like a great monument to two wonderful Christian men who tried to bring Jesus to the country of Malawi, which is a wonderful country and they need Jesus. So those guys are gone, which is sad. And now we're putting up a monument to dead transgender prostitutes. Okay, so now it also stands to note, if you missed in that video because they didn't say it out loud, that Mexican artist Teresa Margolles is also a man who is dressed like a woman. Yep, didn't see that coming. Then you may have missed, and if you're just listening on audio, you didn't see what this looks like. So it's a giant, the plinth or platform is just a giant piece of stonework, and then on top of it is this monument, and the monument shows skulls all the way around it, or plaster faces in this instance, and it is based on this practice of Zompantli, which was an Aztec practice, and it and what this is modeled off. I'm sorry, I'm laughing. It's terrible. It's morbid. It's absolutely disastrous. But this is where we are. This was an Aztec practice to display the severed heads or skulls of their sacrifice victims. So this new monument in Trafalgar Square in England, which used to hold missionaries who shared the gospel with people in Africa, now shows a tribute to transgender sex workers in the style of the Aztec severed head murder victims. This is it. This is where we are, people. And I also have to point out, you all remember that time when we were told that people like Columbus, Cortez, etc. were terrible colonizers who murdered all the helpless natives who were just singing songs like the Disney movie Pocahontas. Oh, you mean some of those people, those native people, were actual mass murderers who then took the skulls of their victims and made them into memorials for all to view and be terrified at looking upon so they wouldn't rise up and fight against the regime power like the Aztecs? Oh, and now we're making a monument of that in that image in the middle of Trafalgar Square in England? Yeah, so that's happening. Okay. I mean, I feel like someone should just go back in time and tell Lord Nelson, who was the admiral in the Battle of Trafalgar, or the admiral that fought in this, maybe even tell all the British people. His victory over the French fleet may have kept Napoleon out of England, but it seems to have let something else in. Okay, let's keep going. Man, this is an enlightening episode. I hope y'all are having a great time learning about current events. So we're gonna turn. We're in Europe already, England, and so we're gonna turn to the Pope. And I usually hesitate on stories like this, but I saw it, I watched it, I thought about it. We got to talk about it. So this is the Pope. He was in an event in Singapore, and he told a group of kids that all roads lead to God. And you're going to sit there and say, no, he wouldn't say something like that. So I'm going to play you the audio. Now he speaks in Italian, and then the translator translates in English, but I think you can understand some of this. So we're going to listen to this. Here we go.
Tutte le religioni sono un cammino per arrivare a Dio.
Because every religion is a way to arrive at God.
Okay, pause there. He said every religion is a way to arrive at God. I'm sorry, that's not Christian, but let's keep going.
Dirò una comparazione. Sono come diverse lingue, diversi idiomi per arrivare lì.
Sort of a comparison, an example would be they're sort of like different languages in order to arrive at God.
Ma Dio è Dio per tutti.
But God is God for all.
E come Dio è Dio.
So that's true. God is God for all. Yes, because Jesus Christ is Lord, Lord of Lords, King of Kings, Lord of Lords. Like, yeah, okay.
Per tutti, noi siamo tutti figli di Dio.
And if God is God for all, then we're all sons and daughters of God.
Ma il mio Dio è più importante del tuo.
Yeah.
But my God is more important than your God.
Yes.
È vero quello?
Is that true?
Oh, it was a joke. It's like he's so close. He says, my God is more important than your God. Now, you may have, I said true. Yes, that's true. And that is an offensive statement, but it is true. Like the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, the God who sent his one and only son, Jesus Christ, is the only God. So technically he is more important than the other gods. But then he says, is that true? Like it's a joke or like it's halfway true. Okay, let's keep going.
E noi sono idiomi, cammino, lingue per arrivare a Dio.
There's only one God, and each of us is a language, so to speak, in order to arrive at God.
Qualcuno è Sikh, qualcuno è musulmano, qualcuno
Sikh, Muslim,
Hindi, qualcuno cristiano,
Hindu,
ma sono
Christian.
diversi cammini.
There are different paths.
I just can't. You would think the leader of the Holy Roman Church would get this one thing right. Okay. By the way, this is a clip from protestia.com. The good peeps over there pulled this out, and it's something. Okay. So if you missed, he said Sikh, Muslim, Hindu, Christians, they're all just different paths to God. And I've got to say, like, I'm sorry, that is incorrect. I'm sure he had a point there. I'm sure, like, actually, we're going to talk about Acts 17. We're going to talk about Acts 17 in a second. First, obviously, I've got to start with John 14:6. You probably know this. I've obviously done this one lots of times, but John 14:6, Jesus is talking about who he is, and he's so, Jesus says, I am the way and the truth and the life, and no one comes to the Father except through me. So I don't think it could be more obvious. I think that's the most succinct way to say that Jesus is the only way to God. So to give a little bit of the benefit of the doubt, we'll look at Acts 17. Like, it's possible the Pope was trying to talk sort of through Acts 17 when Paul encounters the people, the Athens, the people who are on the hill at Mars Hill and the Athenians, and he knows that there's a lot of different places, and he looks at the different stones and monuments to gods, and he's like, hey, I've identified your unknown God, and tries to collect them together, knowing that they're in different paths. And he's saying, no, you guys missed it, and there is a God, and Jesus is that God, and this is who you need to focus your efforts on. Like, maybe he's talking about that, but he definitely says it very obtusely, very unclearly, and it's hard for me to give the benefit of the doubt there, because you can't say, like, the Sikhs, the Muslims, the Hindus, they're all doing great, and eventually they'll get to God because that's their language to get to God. Like, that is not what Jesus is saying. That's not what Paul is saying. That's not what anything in the Bible says, because that's not. If you knew anything about any of these other religions, I did a whole long talk about coexist. You can go back and listen to that in the archives, but this idea that we can coexist together is just a fallacy of the largest portion. Like, even the other religions will say they are not Christian, and in fact, many of them say they're at war with Christianity. So you can't have someone who's at war with you and also say, well, but you're basically on the same path. Like, those two things cannot, quote unquote, coexist together. So let's talk about Acts 17. Acts 17, Paul, Acts, Luke is talking in Acts, and he's saying about this journey that Paul's talking, and says, he made from one man every nation of mankind to live on the face of the earth. So God made all men, yes. Continuing on, having determined their appointed times and the boundaries of their habitation, they would seek God, if perhaps they might grope for him and find him, though he is not far off from each one of us. So this is really good. He's going through this. It's really important. They see Paul preaching, and these guys are like, yeah, there's a lot of guys, and they're like, they're very confused. They don't know what's happening. And then Paul says, verse 17:28, for in him we live and move and have our being. Some of your own poets have said we are his offspring. So he's connecting all these dots. He's saying, like, yes, you all think that you're on the road to God in your religions, and you're on a road, but you haven't quite understood who God is. Now, this is kind of what the Pope is saying, that there's a lot of paths to a God, but all of the paths get it wrong, except for the path through Jesus. This is the distinction here that the Pope did not make in this speech, and maybe he was thinking about it to give him the benefit of the doubt, but he did not say it in this interfaith meeting that he was in with all of these kids in different religions of the world, and instead said, no, every language is a path to God, so just follow the path that you're on. Now we get to Paul continuing on, and here's something that he says here. In the past, God overlooked such ignorance, and that is finding your own path to God and all of these different idols. But listen to this. But now he commands all people everywhere to repent. So Paul very clearly says, you may think you're on a road to God. You may be spiritual or religious or whatever. But if you are not on the path, the way through Christ, you are not on the right path, and you need to repent, and you're going the wrong way. And in fact, Paul would say, going to hell. You are eternally separated from God if you are not going through Jesus Christ. He does not even stop there, and he says, this is verse 31, Acts 17:31, for he has set a day when he will judge the world with justice by the man he has appointed, that's Jesus. He has given proof of this to all men by raising him from the dead, Jesus. Paul could not be more clear here that Jesus is the only way. Jesus himself, John 14:6, says he is the only way. Paul says he's the only way. The Pope did not say in this clip, Jesus is the only way, and that is disturbing. It's unfortunate. He had an opportunity to witness to these people and say, hey, follow Jesus, and instead he just said, nah, you're good. Every different religion is a path to God. Just like have fun doing whatever it is you're doing. It's just frustrating. Like, you have such an opportunity to get in front of people and proclaim Christ and Christ crucified, and instead you just bow to the culture and do this. And you're the leader of the entire world's Roman Church, and this is what you say. Like, I don't love that from a Christian perspective. Okay, let's keep going. This one, so I have a something good section coming because I want to always end with a something good, because it's not all bad news, and there is good things. There are good things happening in the world. This one is in between, so this is not quite our something good section, but it starts out kind of wonky and then gets a little better. So we have Kamala, and there was a lot of Oprah Kamala stuff that I thought about putting in this episode, but I just didn't want to because it was gobbledygook and ridiculous. You can go and watch those Oprah clips. I may put them in a later episode. I'm losing interest in the shenanigans that are happening, but this one was important because Kamala touched on both faith, Christianity, and this cult of death, this cult of abortion that she just cannot help but just be sucked into. So we needed to talk about this, and we need to get there. So Kamala puts out this tweet, and she does. This was September 19th, so just a day or two ago, depending on when you're listening. She says, one does not have to abandon their faith or deeply held beliefs to agree. The government and Donald Trump should not be telling a woman what to do with her body. I.e., in other words, to cut through the euphemism, you can have faith, quote unquote faith, and perform abortions, support abortions, have abortions. And we know that, and I showed this last time, you can go back and listen to the previous episode, she is completely for abortion in and through the 9th month, maybe even after, no limits at all, period. So you can do all of that and believe all of that and still have a quote-unquote faith. Now, I was ready to take her to task on this because obviously from a Christian perspective, that's just not true. But before I got to it, Coach Tony Dungy, whom I quite respect, just tore it apart. And so that's what we're going to look at here. This is his response on X, formerly Twitter, to her, and he uses Bible verses like, this is glorious from a Christian perspective, and I love it, so I'm just going to read it to you if you are just listening and can't see it. This is Tony Dungy. Dear VP Harris, I hear you make this statement all the time, and I'm going to pause and say I've heard this statement from her a lot, which is why I picked up on it again, so continuing on with Tony. Exactly what quote-unquote faith are you talking about when you say you don't have to abandon it to support abortion? Are you talking about the Christian faith that says all babies are made in the image of God, Genesis 1:26, that God places them in the womb, Jeremiah 1:5, that we should not take any life unjustly, Luke 18:20? Are you talking about that faith or some nebulous general quote-unquote faith that says we're good enough, smart enough to make our own decisions? What quote-unquote faith are you talking about? That was Tony Dungy responding to her. I couldn't have said it better. It leaves the question. I think it is a well-crafted question, and it points out all of the things that you should understand as a normal Christian, where you cannot, and you can cancel me for this. You can throw your phone out the window if you like, but you cannot support abortion and be a Christian. You cannot. You can wrap it in some weird euphemism and say women's health and women's rights and women's reproductive freedom or whatever. What does she say? Tell a woman what to do with her body. Like you can put whatever euphemism on it you want, but a baby is a baby, and a baby is a baby from conception. And biologically, you cannot argue that point, though people try. So once you accept real biology, that a baby is a baby from conception, and killing that baby is killing that baby, and it is not the mother from the moment of conception, basic biology, then you cannot at any stage support abortion. You cannot. You cannot believe in Jesus, who values human life, and deal with like killing babies nonchalantly like this. You just cannot. So Tony Dungy, great job. I appreciate you and all that you do here. So that's where this was a bad, and then I think it turned into a good. So we're going to look at something good. We looked at this last week and just want to point to this because Romans is full of bad news. It is. This is the reality. Romans is full of bad news. Bad news about me. I'm a sinner and impossible. It's impossible for me to get to God. And it's also full of all of this good news. So the good news of the gospel is it's not by me. It's not by any works that I've done. It is only by the grace of God, a gift through faith, that I have the ability to connect to God. And it's a glorious, glorious gift that God has given through Jesus Christ. So bad news and great news, the best news. So Romans 8:28, we know all things God works for the good of those who love him, who have been called according to his purpose. And we want to end with good things. This was just a clip that I saw going around. I happen to be a fan of the Creed band. I know some of you were back in the day. Some of you hated what happened. And I'm not saying he's a perfect person by any means, because I am familiar with some of his history, the lead singers who I'm talking about. However, he's been on this tour lately, and I saw several of these videos floating around the interwebs. And apparently, in most of this tour stops, he pauses right before one of his songs and talks about waking up, talks about following God, talks about living in the constitutional republic. I mean, it's pretty great. It's a pretty great speech. You can go look up the whole thing. I just clipped this one little part for you. Let's listen to it, and we'll end on this.
We find our common ground. We build from there. And as we're building that common ground, we start keeping the powers that be accountable. We start reminding them of what our Constitution says. We start reminding them of what our Bill of Rights says. We start reminding them that we are a constitutional republic based upon the Bible and the Word of God, not a democracy. Go study, go do your homework.
So I know that was a little difficult to hear, but some of the things he said were that we are a constitutional republic based on the Bible and the Word of God, which is 100% true, and I've said it like 1,000 times at this point. But that is who we are as Americans. It's more and more less true because of the way the administrative state functions. But if you read the Bible and do what it says, and at least start there in your life, in your family's life, in your community, in your church, you will be moving towards the actual kingdom of God, seeking first the kingdom and all of its righteousness, and everything else will be added, which is a great place for us to stop today. I really appreciate you all for Church Public. I'm Matt Odegaard, and I hope you keep the faith. Thanks, everybody, for stopping by today. Really appreciate you. Hopefully this was helpful to you. If it was, leave a comment, a review, a like, the stars, the notifications. Click all the things because I don't think they do anything at this point anyway. If you want more, go to the archives. Go to churchpublic.com. You can support there as well. Hope you all have a wonderful week. God bless, and we'll see you next time.